Now we come to the fifth Sunday of Lent. One Sunday before Palm Sunday and the Passion, 2 Sundays before Easter. And we begin with that verse from Ezekiel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord when I open your graves and bring you up from them. Today we find Jesus reaching into deep darkness to bring Lazarus back to the land of the living, back to the light of Christ. And you can sum it up with something from William Willimon, who's the chaplain at Duke University. He wrote that Jesus would descend even to hell, even to death, to reach out to us is an affirmation that there is no place to which you can descend that Jesus will not descend to reach you. There's no place down there that makes you too far away from God. Your sins cannot make you impossible for God. And this story from Ezekiel demonstrates that even more clearly. Bones, a valley of bones, dry bones, they've been there a while, can be brought to life by the power of God. And so the theme throughout Lent, through these long, long readings, is the same. The darkness cannot overcome the light of Christ. Today we find Jesus in the village of Bethany, just 2 miles outside the city walls of Jerusalem. And throughout Lent, he's been on a journey toward Jerusalem and the cross, toward death. In Bethany lived 3 of Jesus' closest friends, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Mary is such a close friend that at one point in the Gospels we read about her pouring oil on Jesus' feet to clean them, and she dries them, and she washes them not only with the oil but with her tears, and then dries his feet with her hair. That's a profound act of love and care. And the sisters have sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. And of course you wouldn't send that sort of message unless you meant really sick. And Jesus' response to this is one to remember if we are to have any hope at all. This sickness, he says, will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. And then Jesus stayed where he was for 2 more days. And that can hit you wrong if you aren't careful. It's very easy to misinterpret this. What we have to remember is God's timetable is not our timetable. Human beings want things right now, but that's not the way God's grace always works. And many years ago, a very devout woman taught me an important spiritual law. I'd been in New Orleans for a couple of years and was expressing more and more frustration with getting caught in traffic, having to sit on a bridge for, well, you just sat there until it cleared up and you could continue. And she looked at me and she said, God has given me all the time I need to do what he's given me to do. Now think about that for a minute. No matter where you get caught, whether it's in the airport, it's on a bridge, it's in a tunnel, when you find yourself feeling like you're running out of time, you have to remind yourself, God has given me all the time I need to do what he's given me to do. And it will help you calm down. And I think it's part of our faith. Believing in God, believing in God's providence, especially when he seems so far away. And surely this is what Mary and Martha are feeling, is God is so far away because Jesus lingered. And when he arrives in Bethany, Lazarus is already dead. And he's been in the grave 4 days. And this is an important number here, because the Jews believed that the soul remained in the body for 3 days. And on the 4th day, it departed. And so the first 3 days, the mourning is terrible. Screaming, wailing, tearing of clothes, pulling of hair. But on the 4th day, the person was really, really dead. And R.C. Sproul notes it's one thing to talk about people being revived through CPR, which happens, across the country every week. But it's quite another thing to talk about somebody coming back from the dead when they've been in the tomb for 4 days. They were already decomposing. Now, watch what happens next. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, and she was not happy. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But she has to add more. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. So she's mad at him, but she has faith in him, confidence in him. So Martha was not only a dear friend, but she was a woman of profound faith as well. And Jesus says to her, your brother will rise again. It is a word for all of us who have prayed or wept over someone we love. The hopelessness of someone we love. I mean, gosh, after you've lived a few decades, surely you've run into somebody that you love, a family member, a friend, maybe a business associate, and they just seem to have wrecked themselves, and you just despair over it. What do you do? What do you do? And so you have to have confidence in God that God can do something when it's time. When it's time. And so that's what you pray for, that the time will come when they can be healed and restored to the fullness of life. I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day, says Martha. Jesus then adds, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world. And so once again in the Gospels, we see Jesus confessing who he is to a woman. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we saw him do this to the woman at the well of Sychar, a woman whose life was in complete turmoil. She'd had 5 husbands, and the man she was living with wasn't her husband. And here he's doing it with a woman again, someone who's been treated as a second-class citizen all her life. But Jesus treats them as equals. Martha gets up and goes and gets her sister Mary. And Mary, Mary begins her conversation with Jesus in the same place. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. The one I love would not have died. And Jesus sees Mary weeping. And those around her are weeping. Now, this is one place where the translation's not strong enough. They're not just sniffling and with tears around. They are wailing and carrying on, because in that culture, the louder, the more demonstrative your grieving was, the more you apparently loved them. And so this is, they're having a terrible time. And he's touched by this. And all of us run into things where we want to weep. If you've been to the funeral of a child, it's often just awful. Because it's such a terrible tragedy. And here we see Jesus weep as well. Now, the reason this is so powerful is that this gospel was written to the Greek world. And in the Greek world, God was emotionless.